right. Thank you guys for being very, very patient with us. We've had some minor technical difficulties dealing with a couple of screen sharing issues. Um, I'll let Jeff explain some of that because he logged in with a very unorthodox method. Oh,
Yeah,
we are getting
it's an iPhone. It's
we're
my
getting
fault.
we're getting some very bad echo from you right now, Jeff. Can you mute while you're not talking?
Yeah. Let's see. I don't actually know how to mute. If you want the truth.
Well, then I can't mute you if you know how to mute,
I
because
got
then
it.
you can't unmute. You got it? All right. So thank you guys for being very, very patient with us. Jeff, stay muted. Okay. Again, sorry for making this run a little later than we wanted it to. We do got some of the issues worked out. Why? Oh.
I was muted there. Am I still? I don't think...
That was actually my bad. I had the stupid,
Okay.
the live feed is actually feeding back into me, and it was driving me nuts. So that was my bad. I am sorry. I apologize. Okay. So we had some problems with getting things going, and of course, I just had a problem being stupid. And we're all good to go. And you know that we're all here for a debate, and the structure has been placed for over a week now. We're each going to take turns. Turn order was just decided on before we started up. Normally, we would be doing drawing straws or flipping coins or something random. Red gave Jeff the ability to choose who was going to go first, and Jeff decided to take it himself, so he will go first in all of our turn-based phases. Red will follow him for each of those phases. So, Red, I will go ahead and introduce you. Everybody knows him as Red's Rhetoric. He is a flat earth debunker. You all know who he is. I mean, there's no denying him. So go ahead, Red. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Yep. And first and foremost, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Yeah, my name is Red. I run the YouTube channel Red's Rhetoric. I am known for making very shocking statements like calling the flat earth theory a crock of shit, that those who accept it are intellectually dishonest, and that Jism is a pussy. Thank you.
All right. Everybody knows probably more clearly who Zeteticism.com is, also known as Jeff for the purpose of this debate, because saying his channel name is just a mouthful. And he's a flat earth proponent. He firmly believes in it. He's done a lot of research on his end, and that's what he decides is the real world. So go ahead, and Jeff, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm just a low-level, not one of the big names in flat earth, but I do a lot of active research in it. Just one guy seems to be the right model, so that's why I'm in it.
All right. And everybody knows by now what this format is going to be. Each person is going to have 20 minutes to provide evidence that supports their model. And then after each person gets their turn, each person will get 15 minutes to try to debunk the evidence that they brought forth. After that, we're going to have a 25-minute or so back and forth, just open discussion between the two. And then we'll take questions from the audience for both of our parties. It's a pretty simple format. It's made to keep things going. It's to keep things from going off topic. And I hope you all enjoy it. So, Jeff, whenever you're ready, let me know, and I will start the timer for you.
Go for it. Okay, let me just introduce some things, and then I'll go through my model. I'm not a typical flat earther. I don't agree with probably 80% of what flat earthers talk about. I get a lot of hate mail from flat earthers. A lot of them like me, I guess, but I'm a very low level, not one of the big names at all. You know, I put a video out, it might get 1,000 hits in a week if I'm lucky. Let me explain how I differ from other flatheads. I don't agree with the statement that the clouds go behind the sun and the moon. That's an optical illusion. I'm going to make a video on that in the future. The Coriolis effect may exist, and my model explains it. That's also different. These are all statements of how I'm different than flat earthers. I'm not obsessed with the history of heliocentrism. I just don't include that in my research. I no longer think boats on the horizon prove either model. I used to. but I do not anymore, and that's because specifically of the light refraction issue, which I'll be discussing. I'm not concerned with rocket trajectories and so forth. That's all very interesting. I'm also not an ISS, what is it? International Space Station, ISS denier. I think you can have a dome, and the space station can just be under the dome. I don't see what the big deal is. I don't deny satellites. You can have a flat Earth under a dome, and you can have plenty of satellites. I don't know if they're there or not. I really don't care either way about ISS or those. I've seen a lot of weird things about ISS, but really not part of my research. So Reds or anybody can say anything they want, and it's just I probably wouldn't have much to respond to. I'm not concerned with gyroscopes on planes because those are for empirical reasons that I've not seen those myself. So I don't know what they're really doing, and I don't really take that into consideration, that it being for or against the flat Earth position. Or I don't hold the position that the sun is flat, a disk. Is not. I hold that all these celestial bodies out there are spheres, and they rotate just like we see them through telescopes. I have a telescope. I used to be an astrophysics student at Michigan State for a couple years before I transferred, and I looked through all those through telescopes, saw Jupiter moving in real time, and etc. So let's see. I don't really take much into consideration the weather balloons experiments out there. Some of those are pretty interesting. They seem to be more evidence for flat Earth, but I don't really have much to say about those. The moon cooling experiment, I have my own that I've done. I think a couple other people may have done one similar, but I use a magnifier and water, and those videos are on my YouTube channel, which do seem to show the moon cooling water, but the moonlight, that is, but more experiments need to be done to repeat that. I don't agree with ideas that, if you float a balloon in London for 8 hours, it'll end up in New York City. I disagree with all that stuff because obviously momentum. Yes?
I paused the timer.
Yeah, sorry.
So far, it's been almost 3 minutes of your speech, and you have not brought one thing of evidence to the table. And that was the whole purpose of this first 20 minutes. Was
yep.
actually
Okay, let me okay, the one last thing, let me say, I don't agree with the whole idea of the sun, or the horizon always rises to eye level. I just put an iPhone on an air flight one time and saw the horizon go down. So let me get to my model here.
Right.
I'm a pure empiricist.
I'm going to go to timer again.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, there we go. Thanks. Okay, so I'm a pure empiricist, or at least I try to be. That means that my data and my research is I have to be able to see it with my own eyes, or I reject it. So therefore, I reject all NASA information and things that I cannot verify. I don't take into consideration any behind closed doors, big money science. My model specifically, let me get to my notes here. Okay, my model starts off with sundogs. Sundogs is something I've done a bit of research on, and if you, like I said, I don't have any screen sharing. That's my fault. So you can go to my videos. I've done Zeteticism volumes 1 through 5. Some of them, one's an hour and a half, but most of them are short, and you can see all the data you want, which I'll be discussing here. But sundogs are an optical presentation of sunlight in the sky, where sunlight comes into the atmosphere and has very specific complex shapes. It's a very common feature. It basically looks like a huge halo around the sun, and it has specific bulges on either sides and so forth. And you can mimic this very, very nicely with a salad bowl and a lighter. But more importantly than that, you can show that it's an inverted optical image, light convergence entering into the atmosphere, because you can find sundogs which are in front of buildings in the shade. In other words, if you're looking out at the sun and you're in the city with a bunch of buildings, you're looking at the sun through the buildings, you can see the pieces of the sundog halo appear on the wrong side, in the shady side of the building. And if you look real carefully, you can see, because the only channel that light could possibly be coming in is from the opposite direction than you'd expect, because it's an inverted image and an inverted light convergence. And the only way that is possible to have a sundog perform in that way is if it is light reflected off a concave surface. It's optics 101. It's very simple. And it appears to be a sidewalk verification for the fact that there's a dome. That's what the sky actually is. And we know that the dome is spinning. How do we know this? Well, there's another empirical data point. because if you just simply look up at the stars, you can see the stars spinning. That's what star trails are called. And there's two different axis points of them. One that we call the South Star Trail and one we call the North Star Trail. Well, what they in fact are is the inner axis points of a spinning gyroscope that we exist in. So to back up, the dome that we exist in, if the sundogs are an inverted optical image incoming, that means that we exist inside of a spherical sky dome, but we are below or behind the center of curvature. In other words, if you imagine the system as a circle, imagine a basketball with a dinner plate inside of it, and you spin the basketball real fast, and the dinner plate, the center of it, is right on the equator of the spinning portion of the basketball, of the spinning basketball, and the spinning plate will stay in place, and it will have a centrifugal force which operates in a way that's indistinguishable from gravity. That's what the professional academics hold. The centrifugal force can be indistinguishable from gravity. So that's what my model involves. So if the dinner plate is it's not perfectly flat, it's slightly embowed, but basically I call it a flat plane because that's the shape that it's closest to. And if you look up at the sky, you're looking at a dome structure, and the sun reflects off of it, and there's incoming converging rays, and that's what a sundog is. Now, as the dome spins, apparently, there'll be an axis point. There'll be two axis points on either side of the basketball, because remember, the dinner plate is on the equatorial part, and you can see those two axis points. Those are apparently what there are stars outside of the dome which are stationary with respect to the spinning gyroscopic Earth plane system, which we're describing as a basketball with a dinner plate inside of it. Basketball being the sky dome gyroscope, and the dinner plate being the Earth plane. And the stars apparently are still, and the Earth and gyroscope moves with respect to them, and we can see, and they move, they wobble back and forth. We call that precession. That's what gyroscopes do. That's why the star trails will change in position over time. And so it's all very nicely empirical. Now, we can't see the way the Earth plane is set up. I hold a variation of the azimuthal equidistant map, one where it's called the Jerusalem map. Watch the Zeteticism Volume 4 that I made. There's a friend of mine who made a map called the Jerusalem map, which perfectly works in the system. And it basically involves South America and Africa and Australia all pointing in the same direction. That's the modification from the azimuthal map, and they all point towards one of the star trails, but that one is further. The map is such that it is towards one direction. It's not perfectly placed in the center of the dinner plate disk of the Earth plane. And therefore, one of the star trails appears further away than the other, and appears further down on the horizon. That's the southern one, and the other one appears more overhead, and that's what we call the northern one. Now, these each are actually higher in appearance than they actually are because of light refraction. Optics 101 involves a concept called light refraction. If any of you go and stick in the water, you'll notice that it appears bent at the point where it's in and out of the water. That's light refraction. It's very, very simple. Optics 101. Anybody can verify it for themselves. But the issue is that that changes the appearance of many things that we see. And if you look at the sunset, if you look at the sun in the sky, the rays of the sun will bend in such a way that the arc where it'll make the sun appear higher than it actually is. However, on the dinner plate Earth plane, which is a slightly embowed structure, when the sun, I hold the position that there's a low sun, and I've got a lot of video footage on my YouTube channel about that, where you have I don't have any filtered footage up yet. I've got some welding glass here. I'm shade 14, but there hasn't really been a clear sunset for about 3 weeks here in Michigan, because there's been some clouds or something. I want to have a crystal clear day to put up my video footage of filtered sunset footage where you can see the sun shrink or grow upon rising. I'll have that up in the next couple days. I was hoping to by the time this debate happened, but like I said, I live in Michigan, it's very cloudy. So what I do have is video footage of, when you're looking at the sunset, when it gets real down near the horizon, it gets very, very dim, and you can almost look right at it, or sometimes actually look right at it. And so due to the fact that it's so dim, you know that there's no glare, and you can really get a good picture of the edge and so forth. This footage I have up so far involves that type of sun shrinkage footage. You can see the sun shrinking at sunset or growing at sunrise. And but again, I agree with critics that I do need to get the filtered footage up, but it'll be up soon. The video I put up today on was had some footage of stills that I've taken of the filtered footage, but those are not sufficient. We need time-lapse footage. Surprisingly, I'm not sure why nobody has any time-lapse footage, filtered footage up that does not involve significant problems. There's a couple people that have put it up, but it doesn't seem to work too well. It does show sun shrinkage when anti-flatheads are saying it doesn't. But anyways, I do hold that the model would work if the sun was large and far away, but I do hold, due to the sun shrinkage and growing in size on sunset, and shrinkage at growing in size at sunrise, shrinking at sunset, that would be empirical data for a low sun. And if that's the case, then on an embowed plane, when the sun recedes in the distance, according to perspective, it's going to get near and near the horizon, but there's going to be a certain point with the embowed plane where you're looking at it through an increasing density of air mass, which will make the light rays bend upward towards the observer, which will make the sun appear lower in the distance. In other words, to put it more simply, objects in the distance in an embowed Earth plane scenario that are on or near the horizon will appear artificially lowered by light refraction. This is why the Sears Tower buildings, the Chicago buildings, appear lowered on the horizon from Michigan. The horizon is actually composed of water that's only a few miles away, but those buildings, can be 50 miles away and are behind it, and they appear lowered because further and further away there's more and more light refraction, which makes objects, more and more light bending, that is, makes objects appear artificially lowered. This is why we have sunsets. This is why you only can see one of the two star trails. If you're in what I call the inner circle of which is called the northern hemisphere, you only can see the northern one, and in what's called the southern hemisphere, what I call the outer circle of the Earth plane, you only can see the southern one. And this is also why people are always talking about, why can't I see Tokyo? If Kent Hovind was just talking about this ridiculous idea, why can't I see Tokyo from New York City if the Earth is flat? Well, that's because of light refraction, because light doesn't travel straight, and changing air densities and changing density if there's a medium light is traveling through and the density changes, the air will bend. Just do that stick in the water experiment, you'll see exactly what I mean. And if the Earth plane is embowed, as I've been saying, that means you're looking at objects near the horizon. You'll be looking at them in many cases through an increase in density, which will make them appear artificially lower due to light refraction. That's why if you go on a plane, you take put your iPhone on a plane as it's taking off, and you'll be able to record the horizon line going down. It's not actually going down. That's artificially. Well, I mean, I don't know if it goes down to some degree or not, but there's going to be some light refraction there where it'll appear artificially lowered, because you're looking down through an increasing air density, which will make the objects in the distance appear artificially lowered. If you're looking through a decreasing air density, like when you're looking at the sun up in the sky, it'll make objects appear artificially higher. Sorry if I'm talking fast, but there's a lot of data, not much time. This is all empirical analysis, and if you get lost, you'll have to go to my YouTube channel, Zeteticism.com, and you can watch all my videos and so forth. Now, some of the best evidence that I have is if you look at sunset patterns. This is striking evidence. In some ways, I'm surprised we're even having a debate, because this issue seems to be closed for flat Earth. The sundogs issue is just rock solid, hardcore empirical evidence for Earth plane. The sunset patterns, if you look at the sunset patterns as the sun is setting near the water, over the ocean or Lake Michigan or something, as it's in its last moments, maybe the last 10 minutes or something, the pattern that the light makes on the water, a lot of flat earthers say that continuous line from the sun to the beach is evidence because it's a continuous line, it's evidence for flat Earth. Yeah, not really. I don't know. Somebody has to verify that. What is relevant, however, is the shape of the line usually is in an inverted V or something like that. That is impossible if the sun is setting over a convex surface. The only way, it'd have to be the opposite shape. It'd have to be like a V. So I don't know what exactly the length of the V or whatever it is, but it cannot get thicker to a significant degree or have lines that bow inward in the invert. I don't have screen sharing, which is my fault, so it's hard to explain. But long story short, Zeteticism Volume 5 that I've made is basically a smoking gun proof of that we not only exist on a flat Earth plane, but the Earth plane is embowed, as I've been saying, because the only sunset patterns that exist, there's multiple of them. First of all, that's a problem. How can there be multiple? If the sun is always setting on a convex surface, there only can be one shape of sunset reflection as the sun is setting on the water, and that would be the shape of the sun setting on a convex surface. Now, why do we have sunset shapes? That one does happen because on an embowed plane, you will, in certain scenarios, you can get what looks like a convex shape, but that's the rare one. Typically, it's one that is the absolute opposite shape. So that appears to be a done deal that we live in an Earth plane. So that's the gist of the model. There's other things that the model in Zeteticism Volume 1. I explain how I have a model where I make, using a bowl and some partitions, and I make an artificial flat Earth plane, and I move it around as if it was on the side of that gyroscope, the dinner plate on the side of that spinning basketball. And if you do that, you can create exactly the tidal gyres, those huge eddies or gyres, an interesting gyroscope. I don't know. I've wondered if there's a similarity of through history of why those, you use the word gyre, and the system that I've invented is a gyroscope. But anyway, you can create exactly those figure eight patterns going exactly the same direction and so forth of ocean patterns in a small model of what I call my model the Zetetic eye gyroscope. And interestingly, that should be able to describe Coriolis effect, how you can have in the northern hemisphere drains spinning one way, in the southern hemisphere strain spinning the other way, what I call the inner circle and the outer circle. I haven't been able to get to some of this because I'm just one guy and I've only been on this for a little over a year, but research is underway and videos will be coming out. I should be able to explain tides as well. And also wind patterns are explained by this. That's why you have the strongest winds down in New Zealand. You have those flag trees that grow sideways because they're at the outer angles or outer edges of the gyroscopic activity moving the fastest.
You have 2 minutes left.
Yep, I'm looking at it. Thank you. And there's some errors in my analysis I'd like to disclose. The Solar Dea Uni in Zeteticism Volume 1, I made an error in that. It's not a fatal error. It's just, I think it's an error to that part of the video, though. Specifically, I pointed the gravitational lines in the wrong direction. I pointed them straight down rather than towards the center of the Earth, according to the heliocentric system. So if you watch the video, you probably know what I'm talking about if you haven't watched it, but if you do, that's an error. Zeteticism Volume 2 I made back when I was not doing as careful research now. I never plan to redo that whole video. That's another error. Zeteticism Volume 1, Edition 1, I just deleted. Some other people put it up on the internet, but that's full of errors. It has a lot of stuff to do with radar, but that you can watch it if you want, but I disregard it because it's full of mistakes. Zeteticism Volume 2, Edition 2 is that's the model I stay behind now. And let's see, the idea that the Earth is on an embowed plane underneath a dome is specifically backed up by the empirical points that I've quickly gone through here. And I'll be interested to see if Reds can find any problems with them. And if he does, I will admit it. But a couple of these points seem to be hardcore pieces of empirical data. Sundogs and the sunset patterns of the sun off of water seem to be smoking guns for this system. I've invented this system myself. I'm just one guy. Most other flat earthers ignore it or don't like it, and that's fine. There's going to be little problems, but in general, the model's basic points are hardcore empirical information.
All right, Jeff, your time is up. And just to recap some of the things that you brought forth as evidence, I gave you a lot of leeway because you don't have screen sharing. There's actually a lot of things I would have called you out on that are just claims without evidence to support, which is pretty much your entire argument. I'm not trying to diss you, but without the screen sharing, that's all they are. I'm going to go ahead and let Red address them if he wants to, but I'll go ahead and go cover what you covered just to make sure that he's got them all written down. You covered sundogs, the dome and the star trails. Your model that you proposed is a flat disk in the center of a ball, which is the dome and the celestial lights and the stars.
Not in the center, it's on the edge.
It's on the edge.
Yep, the dinner plate on the edge of the basketball. It's spinning. This centrifugal force will push it to the edge, and it'll act as identical to gravity.
But it's inside the sphere, right?
Yep.
Okay, just want to make sure that was clear. You do not use the AE map. You use a modified version of it, correct?
Yep.
All of the continents are aligned north to south. That way the star trails look like they're supposed to in real life, correct?
Yeah, you have to see the map, but yeah, that's generally correct.
Okay, and just to clarify, that still means that the sun and the moon still travel east to west.
Yep. Yeah, I've got nothing to say on the sun and the moon.
Okay. Next point
Except
you
that
brought
they're
up.
spheres. Sorry.
Okay. The next point you brought up was the sun shrinking for sunsets and growing during sunrises.
Yep.
You touched on objects going below the horizon. You tried to put it onto refraction.
Mm-hmm.
You brought in the seeing long distances because of refraction.
Perspective plus refraction. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, okay, I'm just trying to get the points
No,
across
you're
in case
doing
Red's
good.
missed them. I wrote down horizons below eye level dealing with aircraft, correct?
Yeah, if aircraft take off, they take off in a perpendicular. They always lower in altitude. That would be in there. It's claimed that happens due to cold air, but
You don't need to go into detail. I'm just trying to go over the notes.
That would be evidence for my model, though.
Right. And then you brought up sunset patterns on reflecting on water as your last bit. Because everything after that was basically just plugging your channel.
Maybe, I can't remember. But I think you got a lot of it real good.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you to mute yourself.
Got it. Done.
And then I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Red. Red?
Yes, I'm still here.
Did you catch all of the notes I went over?
Most of the important bits, yeah.
All right. Since he didn't have any kind of empirical evidence to back them other than claims, and I'm not going to say that's bad on his part because he does not have the capability to screen share right now, but take it with a grain of salt.
Understood.
So I'll leave it up to you on what you want to debunk on that in the next phase. But if you wish to go ahead and continue with your presentation, I'll go ahead and start you up for 20 minutes when you're ready.
All right. Let me know if you can see my screen before you actually start the timer, okay?
All right.
All right, so I'm going to do full screen 2. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, and I'm putting you into presentation mode.
All right, thank you. Let me know when it's up.
Present to everyone, you are good.
All right, then, and count down from 5, and once you hit 0 and start the clock, I'll go ahead and go.
All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Jeff for actually agreeing to this debate, because it's not every day that you see a flat earther that is willing to back up their model in this format, as most prefer to tuck their tails and run away at even the idea of having to back up their BS. So I do want to thank you for that. Now, the question for tonight's debate is which model best comports with reality? Well, to argue for my model, the round Earth, let's see what reality is actually saying. Now, starting with, of course, the horizon. Now, go to the beach on a clear day, you might see a few things. The first thing you might see are sailboats disappearing over the horizon, as Jeff said previously. Now, I have observed this myself, and I've taken these pictures of such an event. Jeff should be very familiar with this particular observation. Sailboat, as it gets further away, it disappears under the horizon. But why is that? Why is it that at certain distances, sailboats, which were once fully in view when they were closer, start to disappear bottom first? Well, the answer lies, and I'm going to assert this, in geometry. See, on a round Earth with a radius of 6,371 kilometers, a ship heading away from you would eventually disappear behind the curve of the planet bottom first. This would also explain why skylines would be cut off at the bottom rather than shrinking in size as a whole. There's a clear bias to the bottom half of the image. And the amount of bias is based on how far away it is. Now, to understand this further, let me explain to you about the law of perspective. Let me explain what the law of perspective actually is. Next slide. The law of perspective is a mathematical equation, and so that everyone can stop freaking out, this is the only equation I'm going to give in my presentation. Alpha equals 2 times the arctan of g over 2r. Now, alpha is the angular size of an object as a whole. G is the actual size of the object, how tall or wide it is, etc. And R is the distance to the object. It's not labeled here, but it's labeled line of sight. As you can see in this diagram, as G gets further away from the observer, it will get smaller in their vision. Eventually, the object will be so far away for the available resolution of their eye to see. So, what we would see for an object disappearing via the law of perspective alone, with nothing else, is demonstrated in this video. The object would shrink as a whole and disappear as a whole, never giving any bias to the bottom half of the object. What this means is that something external to law of perspective must be at work here. Now, if it isn't the law of perspective, it's clear that my model gives us something to work with, which could explain this. For that, I'm going to refer you to yet another video. So let me bring this up. A round Earth would explain this phenomenon perfectly. As the ship follows the curve of the Earth, that very curve is going to eventually start blocking your line of sight with that object starting from the bottom and working its way up. And since the law of perspective is not the reason for the ship disappearing, simply zooming in further is not going to make the ship reappear. I have 3 cameras and a telescope that can attest to that fact. Try it yourself if you don't believe me. But is there a way to make the ship come back into view? Well, for the round Earth, simply increasing your elevation should do the trick. And bam, what do you know? It does. Elevating yourself will allow you to see over the curve so you can see more of the planet. And when we do this observation in real life, it's clear, with everything I have said taken into consideration, that geometry is the actual external factor causing ships and other objects to disappear over the horizon. Again, try it yourself if you don't believe me. Now, ships and building are one thing, but what about the sun? Well, that's where things get interesting, as Jeff pointed out. I want to talk about what it does, what we figured out from it, so on and so forth. But let's start with the obvious. The sun rises from under the horizon and then sets under the horizon. How is this possible? Well, let me explain how it's possible. Well, known to most children, the sun sets because the light from the sun can only illuminate half the planet at a time. So you end up with a sun side and a shadow side, otherwise known as the night side. As the Earth rotates on its axis, the part of the planet you are standing on will begin to face the sun in the morning and then turn away from the sun during sunset. This explains perfectly why the sun sets over the horizon, and the curvature of the Earth explains why there is a horizon to begin with. Eventually, the lines of light coming from the sun will run parallel to the surface of the Earth as you rotate into the shadow. Eventually, the line of light will end up being blocked by the curvature itself. So proof of this geometry would be the direction of that light. And if you want proof that light will run along the Earth's surface close to sunset, well, in that case, just take a look at this picture and see for yourself. The mountain is K2. Beautiful. The fact that the sun's light conforms to the geometry of the planet is no surprise. I mean, what the fuck else is it going to do? In fact, that very knowledge was exploited by Eratosthenes when he actually measured the circumference of the Earth. The first thing he assumed was that the light was hitting the Earth in parallel lines. He was, of course, correct about this because the sun is very far away. If the sun was close, then the angular size of the sun would change to some degree throughout the day. And if it doesn't, that can only mean that the sun is too far away for the law of perspective to make a difference to its angular size. So the moderator of tonight's debate, Sean Hufford, did the following for me. Next slide. He used a camera equipped with a solar filter and took these pictures. He took a picture of the sun at midday and then another at sunset. When we compare the images, superimpose them on top of each other, we find that the angular size did not change at all. Again, you can do this yourselves. We did, and so can you. Now, being that Eratosthenes had his shit together, he noted the baseline between a well and a stick. Now, the well, he noted that you could see all the way down, and the stick had a shadow. This allowed him, via trigonometry, to measure the circumference of the Earth. If the Earth has a circumference, then it is round by definition, especially when you can do this all over the planet. This slide shows again how he did it. You have parallel sun, you have the bottom of the well being visible, you have a shadow being cast by a stick. This distance is proportional to this much angle. Therefore, you can figure out the circumference of the Earth. Now, I'm sure everybody has heard about the pole star conundrum. Now, the reason why the pole star conundrum is so important for this debate is because the south celestial point actually exists. Yes, the fact we actually have two poles in which the stars rotate in perfect circles, mind you, is one of the best proofs from reality that supports a round Earth. If you don't believe that the South Celestial Point exists, all you need to do is ask somebody who has bothered to look up in Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, and so on. Everybody south of the equator looking due south will be able to see those stars. Because of the round Earth model, we can easily see why this is possible. Look at this diagram. If we have people living in South Africa, they can simply look due south and see the South Celestial Point. If we have people in Sydney look due south, they will be able to see those exact same stars, although from a slightly different angle. And if we have people in New Zealand look due south, they will be able to see the same stars, again, at a slightly different angle because of where they are on the Earth. Now, let's look at people who live in the north. Well, I'm located in Florida, as most of you probably know already, given my rocket launch videos. And if I look due north, I'll be able to see Polaris, a star very close to the north celestial point. And the round Earth model comes through with flying colors once again to explain why this is possible. No matter where you are in the north, you will be able to see Polaris by simply looking up and northbound. So the reality in which we all see is perfectly explained by the round Earth model so far. However, can it explain what we don't see depending on your location? Let me explain. I live in North America, as previously stated, as does Sean Huffer, the moderator of tonight's debate. If we both look due south, we will not see the South Celestial Point. Likewise, if people from the south try to look due north, they will find out very quickly that they can't see Polaris from their location. What's going on here? Well, let's consult the round Earth model. And this diagram shows that the round Earth model gives us a damn good explanation on why this is the case. As people in the south try to look up to see Polaris, they will find an entire planet in the way. As people in the north try to look due south to see Sigma Nautantis, they will find that there is a planet in their way as well. The problem facing our observers is geometry. This would also explain why when you are in the north and traveling south, Polaris will get closer and closer to the horizon depending on how far south you go. Now, if you continue going south, Polaris is going to end up under the horizon. It's just a fact. Now, I explained how this works on the round Earth model, and I think of the models in question for tonight's debate, that the round Earth model is the one that best comports with reality. Everything works, everything is where it should be, everything matches our observations. That's the important bit. It matches our observations. If it comports with reality, it has met the burden for tonight's debate. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is the fact that we do see curvature from high altitude weather balloons. Of course, to justify that, there's actually curvature, I need to explain something about fisheye lenses, since some pictures were taken via that lens setup. See, it's true, yes, it is true, that fisheye lenses do in fact distort the images. This distortion, I guess, is called barrel distortion or fisheye effect, whatever. However, not all is lost. because even though some, not all of the images were taken with a GoPro or a similar device, we can still come to the correct conclusions with the images we get from such cameras when it comes to the curvature of the Earth. This slide shows a picture of a set grid pattern taken with a fisheye lens. While most of the image is distorted, the center of the frame gives us a valid baseline. As you can see by the reference line, the center of the image has not bowed the grid pattern in any way, shape, or form. If the horizon were to occupy the center of the frame and we were to see curvature, then we would know that there is curvature in reality. That's point one. The second point centers around feathering edges. See, it can be very difficult to see curvature thanks to the atmosphere giving a feathering effect, but there is a way around it using the available information that is in the image. By making the image harsher as a whole, and we'll see an example of this in a moment, the curve will start to reveal itself. As you can see, compelling images don't need to come from NASA. Jeff said he didn't go to NASA. Well, good for him, because neither did I. I actually went to a flat earther known as the Morgile, and this is a screen cap from his video, Flat Earth Disproving the Santa Globe. The screen cap was taken at time code 6 minutes, 7 seconds. What we did was we took a screenshot, made the image harsher, and made a straight line for comparison. As you can see, the different layers of the atmosphere curving with the ground curve away from the straight line. There's more distance over here than there is over here until it's tangent and then starts to drop away again. There is curvature being shown in the image. Now, everything that I have shown you here tonight is empirical by definition. All of you guys can go out and do this yourself. You can do the geometry yourself. You can make the models yourself and see that it matches perfectly with everything that we see in reality. Now, of the two models being shown for tonight's debate, I think the round Earth model is the one that best comports with reality, and I guess we'll see what Jeff has to say about that. I relinquish the rest of my time to the moderator.
All right, and just for the record, he still had 6 minutes and 23 seconds left. And, of course, there is no time banks in this debate, so that time will be lost, Red.
Understood.
And, okay, just to cover the points for Jeff, since we are not coming up to rebuttal phase, Red did present shifts over the horizon, sunrises and sunsets, and the fact that they exist, shadows on the bottoms of clouds from mountains, sun sizes being the same with visual evidence, Eratosthenes and the sticks in the ground experiment, the pole star conundrum, which you kind of touched on, but we'll go ahead and let you touch on that again, and curvature in the flat Earth videos. Jeff, are you there?
I am. You ready for me?
Yeah. Let me set the timer for 15 minutes.
Is it 15 minutes? Now my task is to
address the evidence that he brought forth and try to nullify it.
Got it.
So
okay.
I've got the timer set for 15 minutes. Tell me when you're ready.
Ready.
All right. Go ahead and go.
Okay, first point, I'd like to disagree with the moderator in saying I did not present empirical evidence. Empirical evidence is defined by that which you can see with your own eyes, not defined by that which I can put on a screen sharing on my iPhone, which I did not take the time to learn how to do before. So I would disagree with that philosophical claim by the moderator. Going through Red's points, and then I will go through some heliocentrism criticisms. One, boats on the horizon. Good points by Red. I specifically said I do not think that position proves or disproves either position because of the light refraction issue. Next point, heliocentrists need to prove that the lowering seen in the distance is not due to light bending, light distortion, or to put it more specifically, light refraction. I'm not sure why if we see a boat and we see the Sears Tower in the distance and it's lowered from viewing it from Michigan, not sure why there's only one explanation. That sounds like a false cause fallacy and informal logical fallacies of critical thinking. It would seem that we need to entertain all possibilities and find out which is the one that's most empirical. And I believe light refraction is definitely one that's most empirical, since light refraction is known to exist, and air traveling across the Earth is going through changing densities. Seems like a case closed to me. Also, Red's boat video he just showed, he was showing, that's a video I did a critique on last summer of Red's, and the video, all you need to do is go watch his video, then go watch my critique of it. What you'll see is that picture he showed is what is involved there is the hull of the boat and the mast of the boat have become smudged because they are so far in the distance. So it looks like just a sail, but it is not. It is this hull and the boat. And if you doubt that, go to my YouTube channel and watch the video I made, the 27-minute video. I broke everything down. I show exactly the point that the boat hull and the sail start to merge by being smudged out because they're so far away. It's fascinating. The boat does not go down at all. However, things do go down in appearance. But from what I can tell, I'm not sure if this is right or not, but from my analysis, it seems you have to be further away than 6-7 miles. You have to be about 25 miles or something. Then things start to really show some lowering. I discussed that quite a bit in my videos. Perspective, I did specifically say that perspective is not the sole, in my position. I know flat earthers typically say that perspective is the only thing that causes sunset, but I specifically said in my videos and in the first part that I take perspective plus refraction. I do agree with critiques of flat earth that if I'm not sure, but it's possible that if you have only perspective, that the sun will just keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller into a little dot, infinitely far in the distance or whatever. To put it informally. But what happens is before he gets to the vanishing point, light refraction takes over, because with the embowed Earth's surface, when the sun gets near the horizon, you're viewing it through an increasing density, which makes it appear artificially lowered, as I've already explained, and which is covered in extreme detail in Zeteticism Volume 1. So main point, though, is ball earthers need to step up and explain why it's not light bending. Why do I have only one conclusion that it's curvature, when there's other conclusions of why we see things lowering in the distance seem to be just as good, if not better, empirically. Now, talking about Eratosthenes, Reds is depending on the position that the sun cannot be measured to change size. Now, if the sun can't be measured to change size as it rises and sets during the day, then that would be good evidence for heliocentrism. Again, you can have a big far sun in my model, it still would work, but again, that's not what I think I'm finding, so I go with the small, close sun. Now, it's well known that Eratosthenes' argument would work for a close, small sun. You get the same results. For a far, big sun or small, close sun, you get the same results. Now, Rhodes is saying that he's measured with himself that the sun does not change size. Well, you know what? All I have to say about it is this. Everybody's going to have to go do it for themselves. It's really easy. Just go to a welding store, get a $5 shade 14 welding glass, which I have done a month ago. And again, I'm getting these videos up, hoping in the next couple days. And go download a time-lapse app on your iPhone and put the two together. Make sure you put tinfoil over the welding glass so that the sun doesn't overheat your phone and shut it down, which has happened to me a couple times when I tried the experiment. And see for yourself. Everybody's going to, because you get ball earthers saying it doesn't shrink, flat earthers saying it does, and showing evidence. Now, to my knowledge, there's an awful big lack, if not a complete lack, of time-lapse footage showing the sun not changing size. And there is all kinds of footage out there showing it does change size. So somebody's going to have to explain to me why it's the case that ball earthers are saying it doesn't change size. Now, I know there's some YouTubers out there that are attacking me that say they're flat earthers and say they're measuring the sun to not change size. Well, we'll see. In a couple days when I have my filtered footage up, we'll see who's right and who's wrong. Now, so Reds was depending on the large far sun for the Eratosthenes argument to find. That issue is actually dependent more on if you can measure the sun changing size. The sun changing size is a very, very critical issue. Could be the determining issue for this whole debate, because if the sun's changing sides, it's a done deal that it's close and small, and that would mean the heliocentrism is dead. If the sun does not change size, well, then flat earthers are going to have to figure out how you can have a sun not changing size with a flat earth model, which would be doable but not as clean, definitely. So, but anyways, as you'll see in a couple days, in supplement to my existing non-filtered footage, which very clearly shows a dim sun setting, showing shrinking and growing at sunrise, and you'll see this filtered footage showing the same. Now, the South Stars that Red brought up, I already explained, my model perfectly explains why you can't see some of the stars way down on the horizon from the northern hemisphere, what I call the inner circle, and of the flat Earth embowed plane, and why in the southern hemisphere, what I call the outer ring, you can't see some of the stars low on the horizon, which in the inner circle we call the northern heliocentrics call the northern hemisphere, what they would see. That I've already explained that. You can watch Zeteticism Volume 1 or Volume 4, and I explain it perfectly. To put it simply, if you're looking at stars down on the horizon, near the horizon, they'll be at an abode plane. They'll be refracted to appear artificially lowered. So the same reason that the Sears Tower appears lower from Michigan, the same reason that the sun goes behind the horizon. The horizon's real close, and the sun is much further, so it's refracted much more and is artificially lowered much more. The same reason that even further away are the stars that are just outside the spherical dome. They will also appear refracted downward. So anything near the horizon in the distance is going to appear below the horizon if it's sufficiently far away. It's pretty easy. And again, Optics 101, light refraction, verifies this. And if you've got an abode plane, like I show in Zeteticism Volume 5, case closed with the sunset patterns off the water, you're going to have light refracting below the horizon. So I don't see it seems pretty clear to me. So anyways, let me continue criticizing the opponent view. The opponent view, Red said that everything works and matches observations. Let me actually do that point in a second. Curvature from weather balloons and so forth, that I just kind of disregard all that because, well, Red's is right. You got to do it yourself. It's kind of like the sun. If you're a flat earther, you say all your balloon and rocket measurements match your view. If you're a heliocentrist, you say all those balloon experiments and so forth match your view. People are going to have to do it themselves because all the video footage can be faked. The only thing that really works is stuff we can empirically see with our own eyes. Reds himself said when he debated Jeranism, I don't know, I guess that wasn't a debate. I guess they were talking back and forth on that 2.5 hour Google Hangout. He said at 2 hours and 12 minutes into it, when Jeranism started bringing up 9/11 and San Bernardino and Sandy Hook, Reds said himself, I don't want to talk about those because I wasn't there. I want to talk about things I can verify. So Reds knows what I'm talking about with empiricism. Now, he did say earlier in that quote debate, unquote, that if you have to see everything to believe, you have trust issues. And so he kind of took this, kind of contradicted himself and said two different things in the same debate. Now, the problem with that is that you should have trust issues. Anybody who's a scientist is a skeptic, and you have trust issues. You know that scientists have faked things before because they're under pressure, the NSF grants and all that. You've all heard of Piltdown, where professional scientists faked trying to find the missing link skull between monkey to human, or ape to human. So yeah, if you're a hardcore empiricist, you do have trust issues. So I'm not sure what Reds was talking about in that debate. Maybe clarify. But let me go to Reds saying that everything works on the heliocentric model. I don't know about that. How about gravitation? Isn't the entire all the Big Bang cosmology, including its subset, the heliocentric model, is utterly dependent on gravitation? Sorry?
I have to interrupt. You're not touching on his evidence at this point. You're actually trying to go off topic.
I can't touch on. Okay, can you pause that timer a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let me get this straight. I want to follow the rules. So I can't criticize heliocentrism in general. Only what Red said.
In the open debate, you can do whatever you guys want. It's just during this section, you're addressing his evidence that he brought forth.
Okay, got it. Go ahead and start it up again. Thank you. Yeah, so when you have a balloon video, and some people will say there's no stars, and therefore it's evidence for the flat Earth position. I don't know. I mean, those videos are very mysterious, and maybe Reds can clarify on that a little bit. The rocket launch videos, as far as I'm going to an angle, I don't think that means anything. I just don't think that any video evidence doesn't really matter. And so I'm not sure why Reds was bringing that up. He says empirical. It's empirical if you do the experiment yourself. If you don't, it's not empirical. If you have faith in what somebody else says, and you say, oh, somebody else did the video of the balloon or the rocket launch, and I believe what they said, that's called faith. That's like what I think a lot of heliocentrists want to deny, sort of real faith-based religious type of view. So it's not really, what's empirical is what you can see with your eyeballs when you're standing on the sidewalk, and that's why I claim that my position is that, because sundogs and light patterns off of water are such. You can be standing right there and you can have perfect verification for which model is the case. So we don't need astronauts in space to tell us that the Earth or rockets in space to tell us the Earth is round or flat, which you can't verify yourself anyways. So Reds didn't talk about Terminator moon angles, no parallax, no, man, a lot of stuff we're not talking about here. I guess I was rushing through this because I was thinking, but it's my fault for not understanding the. Let me go through some more of these. So talking about boats on the horizon a little bit more. That issue is one that Reds really depends on for some reason, but I don't know how we can put in what could be an optical illusion. How can we determine our entire cosmology of the reality we live in, or what could be an optical illusion? Yes.
Not to really interrupt, but
No, it's okay.
I did pause the timer because he did bring up the Terminator lines.
Oh, he did. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let me go over that. I'd love to. Okay, Terminator lines. Yeah, that I haven't looked into this issue very much, but from what I have, I know that a lot of people like to put a camera in a room and look at the crease between a wall and the ceiling and say, hey, look, see how in your camera the lines are all jazzed in different ways. Like Vsauce, that guy on YouTube, has that 6 million view video about this, purportedly explaining perfectly how the sun and the moon angles not lining up makes perfect sense. Well, if you look at where he's got the camera in the center of the room. That doesn't make any sense. If you want to match it to the heliocentric model, you put it way over at the wall, as if you're mimicking the Earth and Moon over here in one position, and then the whole other side of the room would be where the sun is. And then if you look at the line in that direction, you don't have the line, it's curving in all these ways that make it look like it's a curved line. So there's some very questionable research going on right there. And heliocentrists are going to have to explain in a little more clear terms than have explained so far how we can look up in the sky and see very clearly the sun way down, like the video I just put up a couple weeks ago, the sun way down in the trees as it's rising, and then but the direction of supposed reflection of the moon is something way up in the sky. So they're not lined up. So we need a very clear explanation, and which I have not seen. And the Terminator explanation fails because nobody sets that up right, to my knowledge. So, but back to sun shrinkage, I think critics are right that filtered footage is needed, because I have done some footage non-filtered, and sorry, people are messaging, distracting me. It is true that non-filtered footage can artificially make a jagged-edged sun appear larger than it is, but the key there is jagged edge. If you've got a clean-edge sun that's very dim at sunset, you can photograph it perfectly. You don't have any glare, distortion, oversaturation of the camera, and so forth. And I've got 5 minutes. I've got a video called 5 minutes of shrinking sun footage on my YouTube channel. I don't really see what the problem is. All those are real dim. I mean, they're all very clean edge, not fuzzy edge suns. They're all, I show you where the links are. I show you where to go to find the videos. You can all do the measurements yourself, and they're all shrinking. So I'm not really sure how we can say, heliocentrists saying, oh, there's so much evidence that the sun, I've done the measurements myself. Well, why won't anybody put it online? Okay, I got Matrix Decode, who's all angry at me for criticizing his non-time-lapse video, a bunch of stills next to each other, the sun supposedly changing size. I asked him, can you just do a time-lapse? And he gets all mad at me. Well, what's the deal? Why can't somebody simply give me some time-lapse footage of the sun not changing size? That guy, Daz, the cameraman, did it, and I did an analysis of his video, and it does change size. He says it doesn't, and it appears it does. I show the measurements right on my YouTube video I made. So not really understanding. Maybe somebody can explain this to me. So did Reds talk about anything to do with air patterns or parallax?
No.
Okay. Okay, let's see here. Perspective. Yeah, the perspective argument, I just wanted to be real clear that people know that. I'm not sure what Reds was talking about that is relevant to what I was saying. I guess maybe he's just arguing for his position in the first part. But yeah, my position, I have tended to reject that, or as a lot of the other claims that flat earthers do, that it's only perspective. So it's real clear in my videos where the embowed surface will lead to the things lowering in the distance due to light refraction. So let's see. Yeah, so the real burden of proof lies on ball earthers having to explain why there's only one conclusion for why things lower in the distance, when we have all over the reality. We've got glaring and refracting light doing all kinds of weird things, rainbows, and light is a very strange thing. So when it acts so strange and we see things in the distance lowering, why do we only have one explanation, this wild explanation that the Earth is a ball? That would need to be cleared up. I think I got 4 seconds, so I'll close out.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. If you want to go ahead and mute yourself. Red,
Yep, I'm still here.
do you still have all the notes that you took for his evidences?
Yep, we don't need to go over them. I'll just jump in it.
All right. Do you need the full 15 minutes?
Yeah, give it to me just in case.
All right. Tell me when you're ready.
All right, count down from 5, and then I'll go, just like what we did last time, and I'm not going to be screen sharing this time.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, most of what was just said is basically a plug to go to his channel and see for yourself. The thing is that I also have a channel. I could do that, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to tell you what's up. Now, I'm going to start with the ships disappearing over the horizon. It is true that Jeff made a video against my ship. What he failed to mention is that I made a reply video that debunks it royally. See, the thing is that the only distortion with ships disappearing over the horizon is right where the horizon is, right at the tangent line. The rest of the ship and the rest of the sun and the rest of anything that goes over the horizon was undistorted in the images that I showed in my video. When you superimpose the full image on top of the video in question, you see a clear gap between the horizon with the ship over the horizon and the ship that's not over the horizon yet. You see a clear gap. That gap exists because it's actually going over the curve. If Jeff is going to say, go to my video and this debunks Red, well, then in that case, go to my video and that debunks Jeff. Next, sundogs, halos with bulges on the side. Now, he says that this is caused by a sphere, but he also said that the sundogs can be seen in front of buildings. Well, then, unless the sphere is right in front of those buildings, I don't think we have a case to be made here. It's also the case that the environment in which the picture was taken, as well as the equipment used to take the picture, can actually cause those types of optical illusions. I mean, just look at my rocket launch videos during night. When they lift off and you see that bright light, it makes a lens flare. And there's 2 lens flares on the side on my Lumix, actually all around the rocket in my Lumix, and there's 2 lens flares on the side, perfectly on the side, if you were to look at my P900 footage. The optics that you're using to take the image need to be factored in itself. Why is it that we have to stop at the dome, which, by the way, the fact if the Earth does have a dome, fine, the Earth can be round and still within a spherical dome. This does not at all prove a flat Earth. All it shows is that there's possibly a dome. Whoopee. Next, the spinning dome has stars riding on it, and that's what's causing, what we're seeing. Well, that does not answer the pole star conundrum. You see, you mentioned a different model where the stars are at the bottom of the flat Earth and rotating right there, so you can have people looking in the same general direction and see the South Pole stars. The thing is that with that type of distorted visual angle, what we would see is stars rotating in an oval and not in a perfect line, and not in a perfect circle. What we would actually see are stars traversing across the horizon, and that's not what we see. What we see are stars, some of them dip under the horizon, and then as they're coming up the next day, they come above the horizon. And if we're at, like, let's say Cape Town, South Africa, or Sydney, Australia, we're too close for your law of perspective argument to make a difference, considering, or your refraction argument to make a difference, considering we can still see it all the way to the equator. We can't have one rule at one distance at one location and a totally separate rule governing a totally different location. It makes no sense. Next, you mentioned towers lower due to refraction. No. Refraction of water, the light bows down, not up. Also, you mentioned in your opening post that the air increases in density as you go higher. No, it doesn't. This is why climbers, when they're climbing Mount Everest, need to wear oxygen masks. It's because the air is thinner as you get higher.
Can I cut in or not? Because I didn't say that. Or
moderation, please. No, you can't cut in. This is my time.
I'll wait.
Sorry, it didn't unmute in time, but you can bring that up when you guys do your open debate.
Thank you.
Got it. Apologies. Go ahead.
So anyway, you say that I'm actually going to reply to that. You said that you didn't say that. Rewind the tape. replay this hangout when everything is said and done, you will see that he did say that. I typed it as he was saying it. Next, sunset lines get more opaque when they're close to the horizon. How are you determining which way these lines are going? By the shadows caused by the clouds? Well, please look at what the law perspective actually is and how it relates to sight lines. Again, this is a simple trigonomic problem. What you stated as what sunlight should do, making a V pattern as it goes over the horizon, that's exactly what we see. And this is consistent with the globe model. Next, you mentioned that the sun changes angular sizes in your video. I gotta say, there is a flaw in your video. You yourself even mentioned this flaw, and you yourself said, "Oh, I personally will post videos when I film it through welding glass." Just that alone tells me that you do not know what you're doing. As evident by the moderator, and he can back me up on this if you want to ask him, you do not use welding glass to see the angular size of the sun. It will distort the image depending on which part of the glass you use. Glass isn't perfect. What you use is a solar film. You use a filter film, and you can get this on Amazon for about $9. That's what I used, and that's why my observations are accurate. That's why my observations work. When you look at Daz, the cameraman, he also makes this mistake, so I'll assert that welding glass, because his video was using welding glass, not solar film, that there is an issue to be had there. Next, you brought up the Moon Terminator conundrum. Never brought that up on my argument. Wasn't part of my argument. Next, you said heliocentric. Again, I'm not arguing for the heliocentric or the geocentric model. I am arguing for the geometry of the planet that you sit on. The fact is that
I paused the timer. When he asked if you talk about terminator lines, I thought he was talking about the day-night cycle of the Earth. I did not know he was wanting to go into the moon terminator lines.
Understood. Okay. So anyway, continuing on, again, I'm only talking about the geometry of the planet. Okay, it doesn't matter if the Earth is going around the sun or vice versa. Take a tennis ball, put it on the table. Is it moving? No. Has it stopped being round? No. So why the fuck is that an argument for flat earthers? I don't get it. I just don't get it. Next, you mentioned up a supposed contradiction in my little chat with Jism. It was revolving around trust, and you said that I contradicted there. Trust is something that has to be earned and is not given for free. And by confirming what we see, by conforming to what we see in reality, NASA has earned my trust. But that doesn't matter because I didn't bring up rocket launches. I didn't bring up pictures from space. I didn't bring up anything from NASA, ESA, JAXA, Roscosmos, whatever, SpaceX, ULA, Boeing, or Sierra Nevada. I didn't bring up any of those companies in my statement. So for you to drag NASA and all these other space companies into it kind of misses the point of what I was saying. All right. But they have earned my trust, if you must know. But the jackass pushing a Patreon account who can't back up anything he's saying, that's when you need to have trust issues. And that's why I do not trust the flat earthers. Go ahead, ask him. Does he get money for his videos? And then ask me, do I get money for my videos? No. So then you brought up the stuff with Matrix Decode. I am not Matrix Decode. I do not know what he said. I'm not going to agree or disagree with whatever he said because I am not him. You need to focus on the arguments that I'm giving, okay? The arguments that I gave revolve around the polar star conundrum, ships disappearing over the horizon, and the fact that we see curvature. Now, you said that you're just going to dismiss all video evidence. Well, why? Why are you going to dismiss it? I mean, after all, the video I showed was from a flat earther video. You know, this is exactly why I went to him. I went to him to try and show that you can do this yourself. You can do this yourself, and you can see curvature in the images so long as the horizon occupies the very center of the frame. I try to be as unbiased as possible, which is why I went to a flat earther video to demonstrate the point. Next, We went into a little bit of detail about the Eratosthenes experiment. You said that it depends on the sun being far away or the sun's lights actually going straight. And then you brought up refraction. Was clear based on what you previously said. Your idea of refraction is flawed because, again, as you're moving closer and closer to an object, refraction is not going to bend up, making the image go down. It's going to bend down to make the image come up. Refraction actually helps my case. The fact that stuff touches the horizon would show that that refraction wasn't good enough, and if we still see it, that's a process known as looming, and it has been well documented. In fact, this is exactly what we had during the Bedford level experiment. Flat earthers didn't bother taking into account atmospheric refraction, but what we did with the 3 poles, thus to cancel out atmospheric refraction, we saw that the center pole ticked up, indicating a curvature. Once you correct for the curvature, or once you correct for refraction, the curvature is still there. So what flat earthers need to tell me is, if refraction is the answer to all their problems, why is it that when we do the experiment that corrects for refraction, that we still see curvature? Better yet, why is it that when I did my observation over many, many days, that the refraction index did not change in those 3 miles when the ship started to go over the curvature? Because you just saw one observation. I have more, and more videos of that will be posted on my channel later. With that, I relinquish the rest of my time, and moderator, take it away.
All right. Well, we both had a chance to present. We both had a chance to debunk. And I'm going to open the chat to both of you guys to go ahead and have a back and forth conversation for 20 minutes.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's do it.
I'm going to let you go first, same as because you let me go first.
All right. Dismiss all video evidence. No, I only dismiss video evidence that I can't replicate myself, because that would be by definition non-scientific video evidence. So I only, just for clarification. Also, light bend. You're right. Heliocentric model, light's only going to bend the sun to artificially appear upward. But we've got evidence, as I present in Zeteticism Volume 5 with the sunset patterns, that we're actually not on a convex surface, we're on an embowed plane. So there, on that scenario, the sun is going to bend downward when it's near the horizon. And
well again, that's all well and good, but I'm going to give you a quote by Christopher Hitchens, because I'm not going to leave this hangout to go search for your video. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. What I showed in my presentation was just that, pictures that I have taken myself per what you said we are supposed to do. And so if you're going to tell me that this has been explained, whatever, that's fine, but you have to give me something to chew on before I accept it, and that's something that everyone should expect. If
anybody can go and look at a sunset reflection pattern. Go take a ball and put a lighter behind it and watch the sunset, watch the pattern of the light reflection off the beach ball as it goes behind it, and then go look at a sunset pattern, and you see that they're the opposite. It's real simple. Anybody can reproduce it.
Yeah, so and the beach ball has a viable atmosphere for comparison, right?
What does that have to do with anything?
Because light.
I'm talking about reflection off the water.
Yeah, but you have to also take into account the refraction going through the atmosphere. Isn't that part of your argument?
Sure.
All right, then if the beach ball doesn't have that atmosphere, isn't that a skewed experiment?
You're repeating yourself. You got to explain what you mean.
Again, you said that light has to go through a medium, the atmosphere, during sunset. And
yeah, I'm in total agreement with academics until the sun's right at the horizon. So I don't know. What you're saying.
What's the difference between you and the academics then? Maybe I'm misunderstanding you.
At the point when the sun is very near the horizon, it switches from being artificially refracted upward to being artificially refracted downward, which is why it goes behind the horizon, which is called.
What's your evidence that's artificial?
What's artificial? Any academic talks about light refraction. It's called an object appears artificially in the wrong place that it's not actually at.
Okay, what's your evidence that it's not at the actual place that's at?
Light refraction. If you go look at a picture of the sunset, as a sun setting, it appears like an oval, and that because it's refracted, because the top and the bottom are moved at different angles compared to the observer. This is Optics 101, and I'm not in disagreement with heliocentrists on this. I'm only in disagreement when the sun approaches the horizon. By the way, the star trails do go in an oval. You're absolutely correct. All you need to do is take a star trail and go take a perfect circle. You can do this with Microsoft Paintbrush, You'll see that the star trails are in an ovoid shape. Amazingly incredible evidence for my model against heliocentrism.
I invite everyone to do that, and you'll not see the elongated oval.
Hey, everybody's got to do it, and then they'll see for themselves.
Exactly, and also the one thing that's clear, Optics 101, is that the information that you show in your video shows the sun went right at the tangent line. Although while it was going there, it doesn't seem to be distorted or refracted at all. And
anybody
so
can just go look up squash sun or oval sun sunset on Google, and you'll see 10 million pictures of it, and all kinds of academics talking about exactly what I'm saying. You're actually disagreeing with professional academics right now, if that matters.
Well, good. Then apparently I'm a rebel, which I am.
Now, Reds, did you actually say that there couldn't be a dome?
No, I didn't. I simply said that a dome doesn't prove the flat Earth. But let me reply what you said. Because what you're showing in your videos, the videos that I have seen so far, is that there is some distortion at the tangent. But as I said previously, if you superimpose the sun disk at full at the correct angular size, you can see exactly which part of it is distorted and which part isn't distorted. And what we see for the parts that aren't distorted is that they're underneath the horizon. And not only that.
So you're saying that if I go look up squash suns or oval sun sunset on Google, I'm not going to see all kinds of evidence of a distorted sun right before sunset?
What matters is
because I think you're gonna.
It matters which part of it is distorted.
Exactly. That's because it shows that the light refraction is you can measure it all across the sky as it's up higher and higher. The refraction changes. It changes the shape of the sun depending on where it is in the sky based on what it's doing. You can trace it doing exactly what I'm saying. As it gets far in the distance, in other words, at sunset, according to the small sun low sun model, it switches its refraction from being artificially up to artificially down.
Actually, it doesn't, because the fact is that when you have the sun that's up in the horizon relative to buildings disappearing over the horizon, for example, the Chicago skyline.
Yeah,
which
you talk about those buildings being stretched. That's exactly the same thing I'm talking about.
Yeah, but they're being stretched up, not down. In order for the sun to be setting, you would need the light refraction to force the light down.
No, how do you know that they're being stretched? How do you know if it's up or down? Either way, they could be stretched. Up is stretched, down is stretched. They're stretched. You need to prove that they're being stretched upward, which your point actually doesn't make any sense right now.
Actually, it does, because the Chicago skyline quite accurately shows which way they're being stretched. And if you're saying
How?
Simple. By looking at the fact that the buildings are partially cut off at the horizon at the bottom, and you compare the buildings between the normal one, like you can do on Google Maps, which, by the way, you agreed with, and the distorted image that we have seen the flat earthers pal around, you put them side by side, you see that the top half of the tower, which is in view, is distorted from the actual image of the undistorted tower.
Okay, you're saying the same thing. You're just saying it's stretched out.
Yeah, and you can do this side by side.
How do I know if it's being pulled up or pulled down? You didn't answer that question.
Because the building is below the horizon and it's stretched
exactly,
up.
because it's being pulled down.
No, it's not being pulled down. It's being stretched.
I'm not following you.
Because with the refraction index of water, it bows down by definition. In order to make it curve upward, you would do that on something like on a road where it looks like there's water on the road. That's not something that happens over water.
Okay,
your refraction index
you're losing me.
Your refraction index argument is actually the very reverse of what the experts actually say.
Yeah, I agree. I disagree with them when the sun's near the horizon. I already said that.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you what
you didn't answer the question the claim you brought up.
I'm going to tell you exactly what you told me. You're actually disagreeing with the experts in the field, right?
Right.
See?
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, so basically what I'm saying, don't use that as a point against me if you're going to be a hypocrite about it.
Look, if my model agrees with the experts on something, then fine. If it doesn't, then fine. Who really cares? Evidence is evidence. Empirical evidence is the bottom line. If the experts steer away from it, then I disagree with them.
I don't doubt for a second that you can skew whatever you can to try and make it fit as quickly as possible.
Anything I say in this debate, anybody can go check out for themselves to determine if I'm skewing or if I'm being honest and empirical.
Yeah, by all means. And so what I'm saying here is, when we take a look at the horizon and we take a look at ships disappearing under the horizon, I see it going underneath the horizon way closer to me than where the sun is asserted to be. Well, this is only to show what we're actually saying.
I don't think you've shown it. You want me to believe on faith that the Sears Tower is stretched because it's being pulled up. I'm saying, okay, I'll believe it if you can show it to me in empirical terms, and I can even go look something up if I have to. But you're not. I think it's being pulled down.
All right, you think it's being pulled down, and you have no evidence. I actually have the refractive index of what water actually gives.
Because of the sunset patterns in Zeteticism Volume 5. And if it is, then what's going on with light across an abode plane is you're looking at it through an increasing density, which means it curves up, and therefore the object appears lower. There is empirical evidence right there from my position.
Yeah, the flaw with Zeteticism Volume 5 is that air does not increase density as you go higher. You just assert it again.
Yes, if you're looking across the horizon on an embowed plane, embowed means it's like a part of a concave surface, you're going to be looking into an increasing density when you look out in the distance. I'm not talking about straight up. Everybody knows if you go to a mountain, you can't breathe as well, and you drink a beer and it affects you much heavier because the air density is decreasing. You're talking about something different.
Yeah, what we're seeing everywhere is that there's no evidence of this concaveness, because if that was the case...
Oh, really? How does a sunset pattern look exactly like a light pattern across a concave surface, literally the opposite of what it should be for a convex surface? How do
you know it's exactly, being that your models don't have any...
Because in my video, I show a lighter going behind all kinds of curved surfaces.
With no atmosphere, I remember that. Again,
you're changing the subject. I just brought up an incredible point. You're changing the subject. What about the point I just made? It's hard.
No. Your incredible point completely ignores a valuable part of the model.
Yeah, I know you already said the atmosphere, but you didn't tell me why I'm supposed to pay attention to it, because I'm very focused on the atmosphere. What did I miss?
The laws of physics of what refraction works over the laws.
Tell me specifically what I missed. Don't throw some generic slams. What did I miss?
Okay, generic slams aside, when you go over water, what happens to the temperature gradient? Do you know?
Yes, tell me.
All right, no. Tell me, what happens to temperature gradient as you're over water?
It depends what model you're on. My model, it does the opposite of the heliocentric model. So you're asking a trick question.
I'm asking you what reality gives me. If you don't even know the answer, then why the fuck should anyone listen to your video?
It increases on my model.
Okay, so it increases on your model based on what in reality? Because in reality, what we see as you go over water is that the temperature gradients get cooler as you go higher up. And being that is the case, what you will see is that there's actually a denser air slightly above it, but it actually gets thinner as you go very higher up. So that kind of completely defeats what you're telling me it does. And as light goes along the surface of the water, it will bow down by definition.
Yeah, you already said. I know we disagree on that, and I've got my sunset patterns as evidence for my position.
If we disagree, then let's move on.
I didn't hear evidence for your position, though.
Hold on just a second, guys. Take a deep breath. It's getting a little heated.
I think this is great. It's big issues. It's not going to be pals.
Yeah, but it's turning into a yelling match, and even the chat is starting to notice it.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay, you said you wanted to change subjects, Red. Go ahead. You choose.
All right, yeah. You also said that the sun changes angular size, and you also mentioned about using welding glass. Didn't you know that welding glass actually distorts the image?
I suspect it because I'm still on this. You may be right. And if I wrote down your solar film, Amazon $9, I'm going to go buy it, and I'm going to do it. And if you're right, I'm going to make a video saying Reds is right. The sun didn't change size. He was right on everything. That's what I'm going to do. And if it doesn't, I'm going to say you're wrong on everything. My welding glass shows very clearly the sun decreasing, but I think I'm going to do a welding glass video and a solar film video and anything else I can see that gets rid of any kind of glare. Anything I can get. I'm going to make all kinds of these videos, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
All right. On your model, I'm curious about the sun's movement over the flat Earth. Now, on your flat Earth model, excuse me, by the way, how does it move? Does it get closer to certain people and then get further away on the day-night cycle, or how does that work?
Don't know. It seems to it seems to vary throughout the day, but I don't know that issue. I'd have to do more sun analysis.
Okay, on a flat Earth, then, if the sun is moving in any direction at any given time, how is it that the sun can only illuminate part of it?
Light refraction.
Well, again, light. You can have, like, let's say I'm in a room filled with mirrors, ultimate light refraction, or let's say I'm in a room that is basically one giant prism. If I take a light and I open it in that room, everything's going to be illuminated. We may not know where the light source is coming from, but it's all illuminated. My question is, how does the light stop at certain locations?
It doesn't stop. I know some flat earthers say it does, and maybe they're presenting evidence it does or doesn't. But that's not a position I discuss. When you go up in go get in a plane. Next time somebody's in a plane, put your cell phone on camera, put it on the window. As you're taking off, you'll see the horizon will go down. That's because you're looking at air through an increasing density, and it will make the horizon appear artificially lower. The same thing happens to sunlight. Any academic, this is optics 101, any academic knows this. Light from the sun bends downward through the Earth's atmosphere, making the sun appear artificially raised, as we've already said. But think about it, what does that mean? That means sunlight can't reach an infinite distance. It's going to all curve down. It's going to have a limited distance because it's all going to hit the ground. It's real simple.
Yeah, the air does not increase density, though. You just said again.
The air increases when you're in a plane looking down, the air is increasing in density.
As you're getting higher up in the plane, the air is actually lower in density.
Right, that's what I just said.
And if the air is lower in density where you are, then by your definition, there is going to be less refraction, and therefore we should be able to see the sun during midnight if we go up high enough.
So prove it. How do you know that? So you're saying that because there's less density that we don't have enough refraction? Prove it.
No, because the weather balloons that we have lifted off at night don't show any sun.
Fine. Then the light was refracted down. I've seen those videos myself.
Refraction cannot happen where there is no atmosphere.
How do you know there's no atmosphere? How's the balloon floating then?
The balloon is floating because there is a pocket of helium in it, and it expands because
it's floating in a void of nothingness. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it's floating where there is a lack of atmosphere. It pops because there is
you're contradicting yourself, Brad.
No, I am not. This is basic physics 101.
You just said there is an atmosphere for the balloon. Now you're saying there isn't.
Not enough of it to refract the way you're saying. Because
how do you know? Prove it. How do you
because
know?
the atmosphere is so small that it pops the balloon. It stretches the balloon.
We don't have enough refraction. I'm waiting for you to prove your claim.
Right, waiting for me to prove my claim. Okay, so this is what you can expect from Zeteticism.com. Air
refracts. Are you changing the subject, or are you going to answer the question?
Yeah, air refracts in almost no atmosphere.
Hold on. I'm going to interject here. When Red made the comment about no atmosphere, you were on the topic of rockets, and you changed the subject to balloons, and now you're using the same no atmosphere argument to talk about balloons. That's not going to fly.
Thank you. So moving on, if we have a balloon that's going up, it's at one size. The balloon is going to be a certain diameter. As it gets higher and higher and higher, the air gets thinner and thinner and thinner. That thinning air presents a vacuum. That vacuum causes the air on the inside to expand because there's a pressure difference. That is the proof that the air is getting thinner. And eventually, the air is so thin that it pops the balloon because it stretched the balloon beyond its breaking point.
Yeah, flat earthers say a dome does that.
Yeah, the flat earthers are wrong because that's not what the footage shows.
Prove it. Prove what you said is more true than what they're saying.
Because when we look at videos of balloons, we don't see them hitting anything.
That's because all the cameras are pointing down. You know that, Red. Stop playing around.
Oh, bullshit. The video that I'm actually showing was a camera pointed up.
So what if the dome is see-through and you can't see the dome?
I would expect the balloon to squish when it hits it, and it doesn't. In fact,
how do you know? If the camera's not pointing at the balloon,
the camera is pointed at the balloon. I just said that. If it's all
expanded, like you say, maybe it's real touchy and just pops immediately because it's so thin and stretched out.
Right. And the pieces that go with the balloon fly straight up even higher. That makes a lot of sense. If there was a solid wall right there, we would see the pieces being bounced and ricocheted
because
down.
Gravitation goes the opposite direction. That's why the helium balloon's going up, is because centrifugal force, according to my model, pushes. So when you get high enough, actually things are pushed towards the dome. And that's why those pieces of the balloon go the same. So what you just said actually supports my model.
Yeah, which can be asserted without evidence can also be rejected without evidence.
I will admit that there's some theory involved with what I just said.
Yeah, there is a lot of it. Mine doesn't require any because it is
yours does because it's a video that we need to until it's reproduced. It's not scientific information.
It is a fact that as you get higher up, the atmosphere gets thinner, and it is a fact that video does not show it hitting anything.
So what if you can't see it? Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
I would expect
it's not there.
I would expect the pieces of the balloon when it popped to ricochet downward off of it.
What you're saying here.
Yeah, so apparently the fact that they don't ricochet off of anything, being that they hit the damn thing, is not evidence of anything.
I didn't make a claim. You did. I said earlier. I ignore.
I'm asking you what you would accept. I'm asking you what you would accept. So
I would accept if I do the experiment myself. I'll make conclusions then. Until then, I have nothing to say.
Okay,
I don't know.
Then in that case, that won't convince you, because apparently unless you do it yourself, you're not going to be convinced.
That's right. I'm a pure skeptic, a pure scientist, and if I can't see with my own eyes, I doubt.
Yeah, the thing is that I'm gonna tell people who are listening to this, look up Hello Kitty weather balloon, and then pay attention to the camera that's pointed straight up. When the balloon pops, see if it ricochets off of anything. See if those pieces that are flying straight up touch.
I already addressed that. What if the balloon is super? You're saying it stretches out like crazy. What if it's so touchy it just pops because it doesn't have it. The popping happens before the squashing of the thing against the dome. How do you know? You don't.
Okay, so apparently when weather balloons pop at different altitudes, is the dome at different altitudes?
Say again.
When the weather balloon,
maybe yes, possibly.
Maybe it's at different altitudes.
Obviously, the dome near the edge of the flat Earth plane is going to be a lower. Yes, possibly. I'm not sure because the question's vague, and I don't know.
The question's not vague. The question's not vague.
I'm saying yes, it's possible.
Yes, it's possible. Okay, so we have a dome that varies in altitude.
Of course. And
we don't have any evidence that this dome actually exists.
Yeah, we do. Sundogs. I already went over that.
Yeah,
what you said about sundogs is completely. All anybody has to do is go watch. It has nothing to do with what you said about rockets. Completely. If anybody goes and watches your rocket video and looks at a sundog, they're going to see that you're just making stuff up because there's completely different shapes. It's like saying a triangle looks like a circle.
Okay, and look at Zeteticism's video and watch that the sundogs are actually in front of the building. So
yes, they are.
Yeah, so apparently
I have 50 different pictures of sundogs doing that. You can reach out and touch some of them. They're so close. Completely in the shade. The sun is totally in the background. Even the sun is blocked out in some of them. There's only one channel that light can come in from. It's from the other direction you'd expect it. Concave surface reflection. Done.
Yep, and so apparently the dome varies in altitude so much that it even goes in front of buildings. Gotcha.
Well, what does that mean? That doesn't make any sense. Explain, please.
Okay, because you're saying the dome is what causes the sundogs, and then you're saying that the sundogs are going in front of the building.
That's right, because they're in. Apparently, you don't know what it. Go get a satellite dish and put it in the sun, and then you can put a piece of paper and you can burn the piece of paper, right? Because there's a light convergence. Anybody can do this with magnifying glasses and stuff. That's what a sundog essentially is. It's like a light convergence off of a satellite dish.
Okay, if I do that.
So it's not where the sun is. A sundog is on the surface of the Earth. It's not. It looks like it's in the sky, but it's not in the sky. It's way down on the surface of the Earth, and we can verify that because they appear in the shade and stuff.
And this is where you shoot yourself in the foot, because if I did that exact same experiment with
it's not an experiment. It's an optical observation of sky phenomena.
If I do that with a satellite dish, and I put a satellite dish and I reflect the sun as to make those things on the edges, and I were to put
they're called parhelia.
Whatever, and if I put model buildings in front of them, I guarantee you I will not get those sundogs images going in front of the buildings as you claim. Therefore, it is not actually caused by whatever dome
you're
is
saying
in the
it's theoretical until you do it yourself.
I did, and they're wrong. And you're wrong.
All right, guys.
I've got video that shows it, so we'll have to see it. What you said is theoretical.
Time. Do you guys want another 5 minutes while I start gathering questions, or do you just want to take a little break?
Yep, 5-minute break, gather questions, or was it 5 or 10? I'm not sure.
It was going to be a 10-minute break, but I was going to ask if you guys wanted an extra 5 minutes to do some more talking back and forth.
Up to Red, so you can choose the topics.
10 minutes, do it.
All right, 10-minute break, guys.
Okay.
And audience, please, if you have questions for Red or Jeff, make sure you put an @ in front of their name so I know who to ask it to. And go ahead and start posting your questions.
Moderator, are you going to read those, or do I need to be looking at them?
I will be reading them.
Thank you.
They will not answer. Red, what is your name? I'm seeing a lot of questions for Jeff, but I'd like to get questions for Red as well. And since this one isn't, nice one, Tim, but no. I'm not asking questions because I'm trying to stay out of this debate as much as possible because I can be biased, and I'm trying to avoid that. I have bit my tongue on a lot of things, and I don't want to get involved in it because that's not my job here. All right, I've got 3 questions for each of them. Does anybody want to ask questions for both of them? Okay, I've got 6 questions. I've got 3 for each and 2 for both. And we're just going to go ahead and let them have their 3 minutes if they want it, just to cool down, level their heads.
I'm ready whenever. If you want, we can start with me.
Let's roll.
All right. Red.
Yeah.
If you could explain why the Chicago skyline was elongated vertically in the Mirage photo, but the sun is being squashed vertically near sunset. I'm assuming in other photos because there was no sunset in the Chicago skyline video.
Yeah, that would have to be 2 separate photos taken on 2 different days. I can actually go into a bit of detail about the Chicago skyline, though. Essentially, I took a Google Earth image. It's a they have 3D models of cities, and what I did was I aligned the camera to be pointed right at the Chicago skyline, and then I looked at the image that we were getting from flat earther videos like Jism's video and so on. And what you see is that there is a thin portion, and then halfway down there is a wide portion. Well, that's weird because the thin portion is only like the top quarter of the building. And compared to the size of the undistorted image and the distorted image, there was actually a stretching, an elongation. Now, if the Chicago skyline were to be below the horizon, which it is, that means in order for us to see it above the horizon, it would have to stretch up by definition. And I will see if I can find an actual screen share of that because I know I have it here somewhere. But that's basically how I did it if you want to know how I did it. Jeff? Next question for Jeff.
All right, Jeff. By what mechanism can I see 2 sunsets? One while laying on my belly, and as soon as the sun sets, I jump up and witness another sunset. How is this possible on flat Earth?
I don't know if I understand that question. 2 sunsets if you land in your belly?
Well, it's a well-established fact that if you're laying down on the ground at the beach and you watch the sun set and you wait until the instant that you can no longer see the sun, if you stand up, you can still see the sun for a couple more seconds.
Well, that would be a change in the orientation of light refraction from if you're... I'll have to do that to myself to believe that it actually exists, but let's go with it. That would I already explained that. That would be to do with your orientation and the refracted light that's entering your eyes from far in the distance. In other words, when you're down lower, your refraction, the light you're viewing is such that the sun appears lower. If you stand up a bit, then you can the light that you're seeing is oriented differently. I'm repeating myself.
I actually think that this actually leads back to the fact that you said at sunset the light starts refracting down, so it would actually be the opposite. But
no, the light refracts up and makes the sun appear artificially lower. It goes the opposite. If light bends up, objects appear lower. If light bends down, objects appear higher.
Okay, we'll go
it's
with
Optics
that then.
101. People might have to go and watch a 5-minute optics video on YouTube or something to understand this. I can explain it if somebody wants, but it's like if you take an optics class, this is like the first week.
Okay, but I'm not going to go into detail about that anymore. Red.
Yeah.
Why does the curvature equation fail when putting the calculations to the test?
Because if you plot it on a graph, you'll see it becomes exponentially more wrong the further away you go, as in it doesn't actually make a consistent curve. Now, on a round Earth from, like, let's say if you're at the North Pole all the way to the equator, you plot the actual curve on the graph, it makes a perfect curve. You plot their equation on a curve, it does not make that perfect curve. It goes sharply at first and then tapers off as you get further and further. Go ahead, try it yourself. There are a few programs on Google where you can type in an equation and it will plot it on a graph for you. Look at the shape that it makes on that graph. That's it. Next question for Jeff.
All right. Jeff, this is kind of off the wall, but I couldn't find a lot of very valid questions for you. But
okay.
somebody wants to know who built the dome.
That's not a scientific question. So is it appropriate for me to answer? I thought we were keeping this debate scientific. I'm a Christian, so God. But
okay.
That strays from the empirical analysis.
Well, to be fair, then I will nullify that question. It's just like I said, it's hard to find questions that were actually valid towards your end.
Anyway, this is a technical debate. Some of these listeners might be thinking more than question. Just kind of pondering it all.
I've got one other question I can ask you in place of that, because if you want to just disregard the answer. Somebody said to please explain the ISS in your model.
The dome is higher than the ISS orbit. I don't hold the ISS is there or not there. I've never seen it, so I don't have a claim either way. But I'm not denying it or affirming it. I just disagree with flat earthers that say it must not be true. I mean, I've seen a lot of ISS stuff, and man, sure, it looks very questionable. But I'm not going to make that leap and make a claim on it either way because I don't have enough info. And it would work if the dome is higher than its orbit. Simple.
I think the question is more on how does it stay up there if it's a flat Earth.
Well, the gravitation goes the opposite direction. Okay, gravitation is actually centrifugal force in my model. So in other words, if you go up, there's going to be a certain point, you're going to cross the midpoint, and then what we call gravitation, this pull downward, goes the opposite way. You'll be pulled actually to the sky dome. And, you know, maybe the ISS is right at the middle point or something, can float around. I have no idea. That's a total guess. I have no information either way, and I probably should stop talking since this goes beyond my empirical scope and probably anybody's empirical scope because the ISS is not an empirical issue.
It is observed, so yeah, it is, but okay.
Okay, if you see it from the Earth, then it is. And maybe you do. I don't know either way.
Okay, Red, how are planes able to land perfectly straight on a spinning ball?
Because the thing is that planes fly through the atmosphere, and the atmosphere has a 1-to-1 speed ratio with the planet. So if you are flying through the air, and the air is moving with the ground, then it doesn't matter what the rotation of the Earth is doing, being that the air is moving with it. Therefore, relative to the ground, if you're going straight relative to the ground, you're going straight in the air. And if you land using the air to guide you, and being that's moving with the planet Earth, you can land on a rotating Earth because the air that you're traveling through, the medium in which that's actually generating your lift and your propulsion, is going with the Earth.
All right.
And questions for both now. Yeah, right.
Questions for both of you.
Okay.
Somebody would like you both to explain the Almania.
Almania?
Yep.
You're actually going to have to explain what that is.
I agree. I don't know what they're talking about.
It's the pattern the sun makes based on the orbit of the Earth. It makes that figure 8 pattern.
Oh, that's because of the tilt of the Earth. See, as the Earth is tilted, and as it's rotating and goes around the planet, you have many different positions that the sun is going to be. It's all due to the tilt of the planet and its orbit around the sun.
Yeah, that's kind of an easy. I think both models have an explanation for that. I mean, mine obviously is the sun's lower in the winter. It's further. Its orbit is further out, more over what's called the southern hemisphere, what I would call the outer ring of the flat Earth plane, and so therefore it's farther away. It's not as much light gets to me, and it's colder. And that's why it's lower in the sky. I mean, both models explain that well. That's the thing about heliocentrism and flat Earth. A lot of the stuff is explained by both models.
Okay. For both of you, is it possible that the equations of geometry are false?
No.
No.
They have repeatedly came to the correct answer when we try them in reality. And I would say, and I think Jeff is going to agree with me on this one, reality is the ultimate arbiter of what is true. And if we do something in geometry and in reality it works out and it gives us the result that we've been looking for, then geometry is confirmed. And then that equation lives another day. The moment that equation gives us a wrong answer, we have to throw it out because something's wrong with it.
Yeah, it's an issue of what math. We're talking fractal geometry, Euclidean. There's all kinds of different geometries. You know, which ones, some describe physical reality, some don't. Maybe there's other physical realities, that other geometries that don't describe ours, describe theirs. I think what the question's getting at is, I think it might be a vaguely put question, is it possible that the people, you know, whether the flat earthers or the opponents of them, their geometry doesn't map out reality? I think the issue is, what I already stated, is there's a curvature illusion being seen with the Chicago skyline, etc. What math describes that, and how can we verify that math is actually mapping a curvature rather than a light bending? Is light bending or is land bending?
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Thank you.
So, at this point, is there any more questions, or do we start the closing?
There are no more questions that I took down because I figured they'd take a little longer to answer.
Understood.
If you want, I can just grab a couple quick random questions We still got
Sure.
about 5 minutes left in the section.
Sure.
All right, guys. Go ahead and start posting more questions. I'll just pull them off as they come.
Okay.
Red's Rhetoric. How come Okay, stop scrolling. How come in the summertime the Earth is 3 million miles further away from the sun than in the winter? Does that not affect the temperature?
It does to a very slight amount, but it's not enough to actually be noticeable to us pesky humans. If you had equipment out, you would be able to feel a difference.
That acceptable, Jeff?
But the question's for me.
I just want to get Jeff involved too.
Heliocentric theory can explain that. But again, the key word there is heliocentric theory.
Okay, Jeff, what will we find at the edge of the flat Earth, and why isn't it documented?
I don't know. It's not an empirical issue. I made a video on that called 24-hour Antarctica sunlight is not an empirical issue. That's kind of funny because actually my model may explain 24-hour Antarctica sunlight. I'm not sure. It's sort of theory mixed with empiricism, so I don't talk about it that much because I want my work to be purely empirical. But to answer the question, I'm not at the edge, so I don't know. I suspect the ice wall, but that's just a philosophy. I'm here on the where the continents are, not at the edge. When I go to the edge, I can answer the question. Until then, it's not empirical and nothing to say.
I would ask that, but it leads to a lot of conjecture because somebody's asking why, and this is for you, Red, they're asking why NASA only releases CGI photos, but again, they'd have to prove that they're CGI to actually ask the question.
Yeah, they're not CGI. Prove otherwise. Oh wait, you can't. It's just an assertion pulled out of their asses because they don't like what NASA's doing. Because here's the thing. NASA, when they do a rocket launch, when they launch a satellite into space, or better yet, SpaceX or ULA or any other company from any other country, they're launching these satellites not to shit on flat earthers' parade. They don't even acknowledge these fuckers' existence. They simply do what they got to do to get the job done, and somebody has paid good money to put a satellite in space. The side effect of them putting a satellite into space is that sometimes they send pictures back of Earth back to Earth, and it just shits on their parade. And I would like anybody to do this for me, and I'm willing to put money on this if they can actually do it. Replicate what the Himawari 8's doing. Give me an accurate photo of the Earth, 10,000 by 10,000, or what is it?
11,000 by 11,000.
11,000 by 11,000, and give me each picture that accurately conforms to the weather patterns that we're seeing every 10 minutes. And do that over and over and over and over. And see if you can keep up with the Himawari. Because even rendering those images, let alone making them, would take a lot more than 10 minutes.
All right. Jeff, do you trust land surveying, seeing as it indeed recognizes the Earth's curvature?
Oh yeah, they're talking about triangular excess. That's good stuff. I'm actually doing some research on that, and I have a video coming up. That's a big issue, and all I can say about that is I haven't done enough research to get to it. That may sound like a cop-out. Go ahead, call it a cop-out if you want. But I will have video work coming out on it. Until that's shown wrong, the flat earthers have to address that issue.
I think that's why it was asked, because they don't.
Yeah, there's open PNS, the earthquake waves. There's a lot of open issues that flat earthers have to address. Of course, like gravitation, there are for ball earthers as well. But I mean, flat earthers have their work cut out for them still.
Okay, at Red, why does NASA show a 24-hour feed of the globe spinning with clouds not moving at all?
Actually, they do. They do show them. The fact is that the video that you're probably looking for, or that you're probably looking at, is from a satellite known as the Discover satellite. Now, the Discover satellite does not move in a geostationary orbit. It's at what's known as the Lagrangian one point. The Lagrangian one point is a point between the Earth and the Sun where the satellite can kind of balance between the two and always face the sunlit side. The movement of the clouds is not fast enough compared to the rotation of the Earth. That's why when you compare it to like let's say the Himawari satellite is in a geostationary position, and there you can see just how much cloud movement you will see in a day. When you compare that to a satellite that's not moving with the Earth's rotation. The Earth is moving, once every 24 hours, and it's taking a picture once every 10 minutes or whatever it is. In a time lapse, the rotation of the Earth completely obscures the movements of the clouds. So that's why you're seeing the difference there. Again, if you want to see clouds moving, you need to go with a geostationary satellite. If you want to see the Earth rotating, you need to go to a satellite that's at the Lagrangian point, either Lagrangian 1 or the soon-to-be home of the James Webb Space Telescope, the Lagrangian 2 point. You need to go to those 2 points in order to see the rotation, geostationary, to see the clouds move.
All right, see if I can find another one.
Time's up, by the way.
Time's up.
Yep.
So I'll go ahead and give each of you 5 minutes for a closing argument. And since, Jeff, you went first, you'll go ahead and have your 5 minutes. Just tell me when you're ready to go.
Ready.
All right, time's going.
Okay, Red's made a couple points that I still wanted to address. The sailboats. What you have to do, Red's is saying he debunked my debunking of his sailboat video. What you're going to have to do is go watch his, go right to the part of mine where he's analyzing and figure out who's lying and who's telling the truth. I'm quite confident you'll see that I'm telling the truth. And Red's basically took an image and put it out of place and made it look like what it's not. But anyway, I'd like to repeat, I don't think the boat videos prove this issue either way. That's, as I already explained. Red's made a comment about me getting money for videos. Yeah, there's ads on mine. I have a very low-traveled YouTube channel. When I set it up, I actually set up my YouTube channel because Red's got my other channel flagged because I put his video up on. I love that sailboat video he had, and I put it up on mine. But rightly, he got, anyway, he rightly got my channel shut down. So anyway, that's why I set it up last summer, and I clicked the monetized video when I set it up, and I've never undone it. All my videos are monetized. I've actually never taken a check. I think it's only up to like $80 because I think I only have 100,000 views total for all my videos. So, and plus, if I wanted to get money, who cares? It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is empirical data that anybody can reproduce. I'd like to say something about gravity. There's a lot of claims that are made by heliocentrists that everything that in our model is explained. That's not true. Even if professional scientists will agree that everything in a heliocentric or Big Bang cosmology models are not explained. For example, what in the world is gravity? It's called a metaphysical force. There was a big fanfare a couple months ago. Professional scientists coming out and saying they discovered gravity waves. They just announced it to the public, and everybody has this perfect faith, religious faith, and believes what they're saying. Go listen to what they said. Go find their specific evidence for it. And you're not going to find it. You're going to find out what they did is they made a bunch of computer simulations. And they produced sounds like TV snow. And they say, this is the sound of space-time, and it sounds like a bird chirping inside of TV snow. And I'm like, how do I know that that's space-time rippling and that's a gravity wave? It's all a complete joke, and they admit it's all a computer simulation. At one point in the press conference when the scientists said they discovered it, the one guy said, we're not looking at actual gravity waves. We're looking at our computer simulation. And he makes a point to say it's not a Hollywood production. And I'm like, yeah, it is. But anyway, you can go watch that video and watch the press conference yourself that I have on my channel. But the point is, gravity does not work. It's the absolute most important thing to heliocentrism and its larger theory, Big Bang cosmology. It doesn't work. It was made up hundreds of years ago. Isaac Newton and so forth, they made a bunch of equations about what gravity does on the surface of the Earth, apply it to the whole huge universe everywhere. It doesn't work. They have to invent these things called dark matter. Say, oh, gravity doesn't work when we look out into, quote, space, unquote, whatever that is. So let's say that 90% of the mass in the universe is invisible. Now gravity works just great. No, sorry, that's called metaphysics, and that's called destroying science and turning it into philosophy. Gravity doesn't work. The absolute bedrock of all of professional science with solar astronomy, solar system astronomy, and Big Bang cosmology fails until gravitation has an empirical rather than metaphysical description. My model actually has a perfect description, which is based very hardcore in empirical evidence of what gravity is. It's actually just a pushing down of a centrifugal force. I already explained that. Okay. Oh yeah, Red said he's going to put out more boat videos. He was saying that a year ago. Now, again, he could put out boat videos, but I won't really have much to say on them either way because I've changed my position. I don't think they prove anything either way. But Reds, you got to if you're saying you're going to do something, you got to do it. I mean, I know I contradict myself, and you actually proved me wrong a year ago when we were debating. You actually beat me on one. I will just happily admit because I got no ego to protect here. Anyway, so I got a minute left here. I think that if anybody goes back and looks at all my information on my channel is very terse, probably just a couple hours of viewing total. It's all based in video evidence. The empirical evidence that has been claimed to not exist is all viewable there. I only call it empirical evidence what you can reproduce yourself or see with your own eyes. Nothing in NASA, nothing to do with rockets. All that stuff is not in the strict definition of science. Is that what you can see with your own direct eyesight, not through a camera, not through some video that may or may not be real. I'm not saying any NASA videos are fake. I'm not saying they're real either. There's a lot of weird stuff about those videos. Why do we go to Rocky Mountain National Park and go way up in the mountains and the stars are so much more visible? It's unbelievable. That's why scientists put telescopes on mountains. But then you go even higher in a plane and the stars are much more dim. And then there's these videos that which I would need to verify for myself. There's no stars. There's a lot of weird things going on, and we need to stick with empirical information. So we start going off that, then it just turns into a big fight, and people fight because they don't have evidence. When you have evidence, there's no fight because you can just go see it with your own eyes. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. 1 second. 0.
All right. Red? You want to count down?
Thank you. Yeah, just count down from 5 and tell me when.
All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, well, actually, I do want to thank Jeff for actually showing up because a few flat earthers have ran away from such a debate. So thank you at least for having the balls, yes, pun intended, to show up and put your position under scrutiny. I do want to say that when you say that we need to look on everything with empirical evidence, fine. But we have no empirical evidence for this dome, and yet you accept it. So I see a really bad contradiction there. I see a really bad contradiction when it comes to simply ignoring what scientists say when they're talking about, like, let's say, light refraction, because it, like it or not, it doesn't act the way that you say it's acting. Now, flatheads will say that there's more to their position than just a stupid conspiracy theory. They'll claim that there's actual scientific support for their assertions that the Earth is flat. But I ask you all in the chat, people watching here, because this debate is for you, did we hear anything that can be counted as scientific evidence for a flat Earth, or did we hear a lot of plugging that stuff was already said or stuff will be said in the future? Did we hear that? All right, listen. As Christopher Hitchens said, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And if you look at what Jeff said here tonight, I think it's fairly obvious that nothing was given. Therefore, nothing from him should be accepted. My arguments are based on science, what I have done myself. They're based on mathematics that I have done myself. They're based on stuff that I have confirmed myself. Not only that, people in the south of the equator that I have gone to, they're my friends. They don't work for NASA. They don't work from SpaceX. They don't work for any space company. They're regular, everyday people just like you and me, and they are the ones I went to when it came to observations in the south, Dazza the cameraman being one of them. And thus, we can confirm what I said. You don't need a YouTube video of some dumbass pelling a Patreon. And to correct Jeff, I did not say that you were that dumbass pelling a Patreon. I was referring to somebody else when it came to the trust issues. See, I trust somebody, I trust somebody or an organization or whatever that has demonstrated what they're showing to be the case. They have demonstrated what they're showing to work. I have double-checked it as best I can, and everything checks out. That's just the way it works. Now, here's the thing I want to say to everybody else. You too can confirm what I just said. Go outside, see for yourself. Do the observations. Do the measurements. Do the mathematics. Double check your work. Have others verify your findings, people. Do this, and you will find out very quickly that the Flat Earth camp has been full of shit the entire time. You will find that everything that they have been peddling does not comport with reality. Now, Jeff has this quote on his page. Theory is the enemy of knowledge. Well, a theory in the scientific context is defined as a well-substantiated explanation based on some aspect of the natural world, based on a body of facts that have been repeatedly confirmed through observation and experimentation. Now, the facts are not the enemy of knowledge. Without the facts, you don't have any knowledge. And to all the flat earthers watching this stream, stop being scared of the facts. Start embracing them. Start trying to find them. Don't go to the first conspiracy theory that sounds good to you just because people have a hate boner for NASA. All right? NASA is just an organization that shoots shit off into space and then draws gentleman sausages on Mars. The reason why we're able to do shit like that and draw bollocks on the red planet is because we understand what's going on. We have an accurate model of reality. That's why we can move within that reality. That's why we can go to other planets. That's why we have an understanding of gravity. A question was asked, what is gravity? Gravity is a warping of time and space based on mass, based on how big the mass is. You want proof of this? Yes, Newton actually figured out F equals big G m1 m2 over r to the second. And this is in line with the equation that even flat earthers will agree, F equals mass times acceleration. Take those two equations, big G m1 m2 over r to the second, and see if they equal mass times acceleration. Because if flat earthers are saying that that equation is real, then they are agreeing with the universal gravitational constant, big G. Are you going to trust science, which has worked their absolute asses off to figure out the answers? Or are you going to trust a position that is self-contradictory depending on who you're asking? Thank you very much. I'm done.
And that's time. I'd like to thank you both for showing up. It was a fairly good debate. We had a few hiccups. And I'd like to thank the audience for showing up. I never even bothered checking my viewers out with 210, which is pretty good. And I understand Red is going to have a after-show hangout. Are you going to have one as well, Jeff?
No. I'm not. I'm going to bed. Actually, I'm going to play the drum. I'm a drummer. I want to play the drums and go to bed.
All right. This video will be on my channel. You both have the rights to mirror it.
Appreciate that.
I only respectfully ask that you keep the description unchanged, the title unchanged, and you don't do any editing to the video.
Done.
Understood.
All right. I'd like to thank everybody for coming again, and this hangout is over.
Thank you.